Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our first show of Barbara's Banner. We are so glad you are here with us today, and I am excited about our subject. But let me introduce first my sidekick and co host, Brian Boyer, who will be with us on every show. And our guest today is a good friend, Dr. Tony Smith, who is going to talk to us about culture in the workplace. Hi, Tony. Thanks for being here today.
Barbara, I'm delighted to be here. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, great. Well, maybe we'll start out by both of you talking a little bit about yourselves very briefly so that give our audience a little taste for what they're in store for. So, Brian, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll start real quick. And Barbara, first off, great intro show that we had. And it's, as I did mention in that show, and I'll say it again, it's an honor and humbling to be your co-host and partner on this endeavor. We've been talking about this for a while, and it's exciting to finally see it off the ground. I know that you have a lot of wisdom that you will be imparting on our viewers and our listeners. So thanks for letting me be part of the ride, part of the initiative. It's great. You've been an inspiration to me. I'm looking forward to tag teaming with you on the interview process when we have our guests. I recently started my own small business called The Boyer Group, which can be found at theboyergroupllc.com. I do marketing and business work, strategy, execution, kind of an extension of telling various organizations stories. That's what marketing is. And, I've seen a lot of different types of leadership. I have my own styles, obviously. I'm not saying that they're the be all end all, but I have my own. I have seen a lot, and I'm looking forward to this show and other shows because, as you know, Barbara, when you do what we do, you can always learn. So I look forward to engaging our audience during the show on social media. Follow us, like us, share us, and maybe even doing some business together down the road.
Very good. Thank you. As you and I talked about in the introductory show, you and I have been together for a very long time, dating back to our years at the DC Chamber of Commerce, where you headed up communications for me at the Chamber. So, and we've just continued to work together all these years since then. So delighted to have you as my sidekick. And Tony, I think I've known you maybe a little bit longer than I've known Brian. We've done some things together, and so why don't I let you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Barbara. I'm an organization consultant. I've been working with organizations, particularly organizations that are interested in changing for a very long time. I've had an opportunity to learn, usually the hard way, what it really takes in real life to change organizations. And Barbara, I've always enjoyed working with you because you're just so sharp. You're just right there, and it's exciting to work with people who are getting it and who are working to implement it. And I feel the same way about Brian. I've had a few interactions with him, and I love his form of communication. So I'm looking forward to this discussion today.
I'm sorry, I just have to add, Barbara, it's good that we're getting people on the show that like us because we really didn't do that on purpose. Tony is on here because it's informational. He's a guru at the leadership thing. It's not just because he was going to say nice things about him.
But that also helps.
It does help, yes.
It does.
Well, why don't I start, and then Brian and I are going to kind of go back and forth in this podcast, making sure that we get as much information out to our viewers and listeners as possible. Tony, you talked a little bit about your background and change, and tell me a little bit about how hard is it to change the culture in an organization? What does that all entail, and what should leaders look out for?
Well, first of all, I would say just simply culture is the way people work. And there are two kinds of culture. There's the formal culture. This is our vision. This is our mission. Here are the statements that the people in charge make about how we're going to work together. But much more important is what we call the informal culture. That's what people really do. And of course, if you're a leader, that's what you really care about. It's not what do people agree on. I'll give you an example. I was working with an organization once, and there was a meeting with the senior vice president and all the vice presidents who were his direct reports. they came to a difficult agreement on a policy they were going to follow. On the way out, I just happened to be right behind one of the vice presidents, and she pulled her administrative assistant aside and said, don't accept any calls from the senior vice president for the next week because I just agreed to do some things that we're not going to do. Now that's an example.
Wow.
That's culture. So if you're in charge, you really want to have a good understanding of your culture. It gives you tools you didn't have. So creating change means changing people's unconscious behavior as well as their conscious behavior. You need to have a great relationship.
That also sounds like a little sabotage.
There's
People expect that.
Yeah. And a lot of times when people are sabotaging, they don't think they're sabotaging. They think they're going to get away with it. And of course, if you're a leader, what you've got are results you didn't want. And that's very frustrating.
Wow. Interesting.
Tony, just to build on that, and the great definition of what culture is, because I think you could probably ask 10 different people and get 10 different answers on what culture is, which actually may be part of the problem in some organizations. But how would you say culture is created? Is it organic, or are leaders, I'm not saying what should they be doing, I'm kind of asking what they are doing. Are leaders sitting with their leadership team saying, this is what our culture needs to be? Or is it happening just based on the people that they're hiring? Does HR get involved? I worked for an organization once, and I remember the first couple of days I was there, everybody was telling me that everybody that works here is a type A personality.
Yeah.
And that's, to an extent, I guess that's great, because we know what type A personalities are, right? And there's probably some very talented people. But it also thinks from a cultural standpoint, maybe you need some balance as well.
Absolutely.
So how are the cultures formed? Is it organic, or are leaders sitting there saying this is what it needs to be?
Well, I think to answer that question, we're going to get into one of your areas, Ryan, which is communications. So you set the culture. A lot of times you make agreements with people. Here's how we're going to work together. And one of the key things about culture is people need to understand what's in it for them individually. And that starts with, here's what we produce. Here are the products and services we produce, and they make the world better in the following ways. People need to understand that and buy in. So you need to create a lot of buy-in. There's a famous study years ago of the power of a president, and the researchers said, well, after they looked at it, the presidential power is the power to persuade. If you're a leader, culture means you're persuading people to work together well. And it's a bit complex. You may have people who were treated in a particular way when they were kids growing up, and they're going to be triggered all over the place by stuff. So you need to create a culture that's so powerful, that's so well designed, that people modify their behavior in order to get the benefits of it, which is, I feel good about myself because I'm working well. I feel good about what we're producing together. So you create it partly through formal agreements and partly through ongoing behavior modification as you go along.
When the three of us were working with a client about 3 years or so ago, one of the things that we did was to have the leadership create a leadership pack that listed all of the things that they all signed on to and agreed to do together. Is that something that you recommend?
I do. I recommend that. And then I recommend that that even with the best intentions, a lot of times people will not do what they said they would. And if you're the leader, you need to understand that that's really natural and that it's not the end of the world. And that you need to constantly be willing to renegotiate. And let me say something else about this. When we work with organizations that are going through changes, a lot of times the leaders will, when they start with you, they'll say, you know what, everyone needs to change, including me. They don't mean it. They mean everyone else needs to change. Right. And that's the key to success, is getting the leader to understand that he or she needs to change too. And that's a good thing. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you if you need to change. It means you want to make things work better.
I always had this question, and we know culture is important. we know it can make or break the success of an organization, obviously. And it usually, I don't even, maybe it's not usually, maybe it's always, or should start at the top. And one of the things that I've always wondered, I'd be curious to, both of your perspectives on this, is that, is it sometimes better, let's say you're hiring somebody for, well, it could be, let's say a senior role might be a little bit more extreme, or even a mid-level role, but somebody's coming into your organization, let's say you have 50 employees. And you have people that might be qualified for the job, but you're also interviewing them to find out what their personality is, right? Mm-hmm. There's all these different personality, with Myers-Briggs and all these other ones that are out there. And I guess my question is it better to maybe take the person that's maybe just maybe a step below the person that's the ideal candidate based on skill level, but maybe the person with the slightly less experience has a better fit for that organization? Who do you hire in that situation? Is it better to take the person that has maybe the few more years of experience, or the person that you think maybe has a little bit less experience, but will be a much better fit for the organization?
Well, Barbara's been in this situation a lot. What would you say, Barbara?
Well, I think I would opt for the person that I think is going to be a better fit for the organization, because if they're missing some skill set, that's something that I could teach them or that they could learn. So many leaders make the mistake of trying to hire people that are just like them. And I think that's absolutely the wrong thing. You want to make sure you hire people that have your same value system, and that you believe in the same things that you believe in, but that they have a different perspective on how to go about doing the job. If you hire everybody just like you, what a boring organization it will be. And I always tried to hire people that had skill sets that I didn't have, because it complements me. But I know that people make the mistake of trying to hire in their own image, and I think that's absolutely the wrong thing to do.
Yep. Once, here's a brief story about that. There was a moment in my life, it was a life or death moment. I was having a heart attack. Fortunately, I had it at the hospital. They wheel me into the operating room, and there are all these doctors and nurses, and they all came up to me one by one and introduced themselves as if we were at a cocktail party. They shook my hand and they said, "Here's my function. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that." It was so comforting. And I had to stay conscious throughout the operation. So I saw what was going on. They were like a professional dance troupe. They worked together so well. They moved and did everything. It was beautiful. And of course, they saved my life. So that's the goal of an organization, is to have people move together, breathe together. And it's exhilarating to be, many of us have been part of work teams like that every once in a while. It's exhilarating. You feel better about life. You feel better about yourself.
That they're all in lockstep with each other. But everybody knows the role that they have to play, and how that role fits into the whole.
Yes, and when someone screws up, you take the person who can help moves in and automatically helps out.
Right.
Tony, it feels like today, in the situation that we're in, obviously with the pandemic, you mentioned communication, and you're not going to get any arguments from me about how important communication is, right?
No.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But it's much harder. I mean, I think we're doing well here, but I would much rather be in a room with the two of you right now. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
We can certainly accomplish this interview through these means. But now I feel like now culture means something different, because people are all scattered all over the place. An email that, when I say, we were talking about brevity before, sometimes that doesn't translate well on email. Oh, why is that person angry at me?
Yeah.
Well, no, they're just, their kid was bothering them, and and it was a short email. They weren't angry at you. So I guess my question, it's almost like a two-part question. How do we kind of keep a culture going when we're remote? And then how do we then carry, because we hope at some point that we'll be, a lot of people will be back in their offices,
Right.
But even then it might be a hybrid. How do we keep the culture going if we had a successful culture? And then how do we sort of transition it back into the office place, into the workplace, when we do get back to that at some point?
You know, the first thing I'd like to say is what we're seeing now has been a big surprise to me. And that is a month or two away from each other changes the culture enormously. People tend to look at it as an opportunity to correct things that have been driving them crazy for years. There will be power struggles, there will be disagreements, there will be things that you had no idea were going on. It's also an opportunity to make things work better. But I think the way you deal with it is you stay in a lot of communication with each other. You recognize that people are communicating like this for a few minutes, then they're going to go off and do everything alone for a while. People may need more reinforcement. They may need more personal attention. You need to get on emailing with them or Zoom with them. People need a lot of attention when they're going through these changes. You will need to recreate the culture. You just need to do that. And if you are not prepared to do that, it's trouble. If you are prepared to do it, it's a beautiful opportunity.
Well, now I do want to ask now, Barbara, I want to ask you this question because I know, and Tony, you're part of this effort as well, and it's an opportunity for us to tell people a little bit about the Lang Leader class. And so there are resources that are out there now then to help people during this time. And Barbara, I want to give you an opportunity to, and I know Tony is running a few of the seminars online that can help people maybe with that, with that kind of that transition, that pivot, that adjustment. Mm-hmm. There are resources out there. Talk about what resources that you're offering a little bit as far as helping people navigate through this challenging time, because I think that's a key point to this conversation.
Well, as we talked about in our introductory series, Lang Strategies have had to pivot and change the way we do things because I think I'm at my best in my personal one-on-one working with people. And most people are not in their offices anymore. It's a little dangerous to try to go meet with people anyway. And so the new way is to do everything virtually. And so we've started to do a lot of that. And I admit that I'm doing it kicking and screaming because that's just not the way I like to work. However, we, with all of your help, developed Lang Leader Class. And it's a series of 7, I believe, segments. And it's taking the expertise of the 3 of us, plus Maria. And the things that we used to do in person with people consulting, we're trying to do that segmented online. And so it's how do you handle conflicts? Just the strong management and leadership one-on-one. How do you work from home now? And that's very good with all the interruptions with the kids in the next room doing their virtual learning. How do you transition to if you're ready to make a career change? What are the things you ought to be thinking about? How to turn around an organization. So all of those are things that we deal with in Lang Leader Class. And I invite people that are listening to sign up. The 3 of us are conducting these sessions, and it is our probably 150 years of executive management experience that we're trying to impart in a virtual way.
Yeah, and I'd add another thing is that a good leadership training is all about being who you really are, learning how to be you at your best. It's quite personal. I want to bring the person I am out into the world, and I want to bring the person I can be. And often people who are successful leaders are really, really good at honing their own skills. It's like you go to a concert and you see a great violinist. That person has trained themselves for years and years in order to combine who they really are and what the music really is. And it's a very exciting process, and it's very rewarding.
It's interesting because of all the things that you, Brian, have posted on LinkedIn and in social media. I got a LinkedIn message from a young lady that works in the DC government. And she used to work for me at Fannie Mae many, many years ago. And one of the things she said to me, she sent me a note and she said, would you mind could we talk? And I like some career advice. And she said, one of the things I remembered about you at Fannie Mae is that every day you came around and talked to us and said good morning to everybody. And it wasn't at 8:30 in the morning when you were trying to check in to see if everybody arrived on time. It was a little mid-morning. She said, but that just stuck with me. And she said, after you left the area, people talked about it and said, my, she came around every day. She comes around every day to say good morning. For me, that's nothing. That's what you're supposed to do as a leader and as a manager. That wasn't anything special, but you don't realize how people pay attention to those things, and just little things of saying good day or good morning to everybody. So she Zoomed me this morning and wanted to pick my brain, but some of that came from a lot of the postings on LinkedIn, and so she got up the nerve enough to send me a message and ask would I talk to her for a few minutes. And that's kind of what all this is about. She's looking at making a career change. And so I pointed her to Lang Leader class because we can show her how to do some of the things that she's talking about.
I think that's a great point, Barbara. And in your mind, it was a little thing, but it obviously was a big thing. If she's remembering it all these years later,
Right.
Tony, you know, we there's obviously different levels of change management, organizational management, but is it sometimes just those little things that can go a long way? I mean, I understand that. I know you've had an incredible career guiding, you know, organizations through the leadership process, and I'm sure you probably had some discussions like this with some leaders. But is it sometimes just a smile or an acknowledgement, or maybe something that someone's not even really thinking about because it's not part of a strategy, but it's just a good morning, a hello, how's your family doing, you know, that kind of thing? Tony, would you say that?
It is, and I've seen Barbara at work doing this, and it makes a huge difference. I don't need to tell you, it's hard to go to work sometimes. There are no number of stressors. You're never certain that things are going right. There are conflicts you got to deal with. It's just part of every day. And when the person in charge comes by and says hi, asks how you're doing, it just changes everything. This is all very personal. Mm-hmm. And really, really matters that you engage with people. And I'll just say this, as a leader, it doesn't mean that you have to be overwhelmed by the personal part of it either. Just a little bit will really make a big difference.
Right.
Well, I had a very interesting experience working for a tremendous leader at the Washington, D.C. Chamber of Commerce. That's you, Barbara. But that does lead me to the question though, that I want to ask, and we're starting to get to the end of the interview here. So I do want to allow Barbara to ask final questions that she has as well. But this is really actually for both of you as well. You know, I remember when we started at the Chamber, and one of the reasons why Barbara had hired me so early was because it was marketing. We needed to start telling our story. We needed members to, you know, I remember we were losing members. There wasn't a lot of morale at the Chamber within the staff. Members didn't really know all the benefits that were available to them, and so they were losing a lot of people. And I remember it was sad, exciting that we had an opportunity to start telling the story, but sad that so many people were leaving when they just didn't really know what was offered to them. So I'll ask you both this question. The idea of a culture that's not good, I'll even go so far as to say toxic. How much effort and how much of a reality is it that you can take that toxicity and change that organization? I know it doesn't happen overnight, but change that organization into one that has and anybody can say whatever is a good culture to them, right? It's kind of a subjective thing. Mm-hmm. But what would be considered a culture that fosters success within the organization? How long does that take? What has to be done? And how much work goes into that from the leader who is at the top and kind of manages that whole thing? And I'll ask you both that because Barbara went through it. I know you've gone through it several times. Tony, I know that's what you do.
Well, how I say is that it's a journey. It's a process. And it's a step-by-step journey. And it's not going to happen immediately, but you can make enormous progress as you go along. And you're going to have to go and it'll start to look good, and then it won't look good for a while. Then you get back at it and you just keep it up. And little by little, when people are coming on board more with it, you as a leader get an awful lot of support that you weren't getting before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would add to that. I think that is absolutely the right thing. I think the leader has got to paint a picture of what the vision what this could be, what the organization can be, and have to reinforce that over and over and over again. The other thing that I think the leader has to recognize, that everybody is not going to be on that journey with you all along the way. And you have to, at some point, decide which people aren't going to go with you, and be willing to make the tough decisions that you separate them from the group, because they may continue to be toxic. I used to, in some of the speeches I've given many years ago, I used to say that there's somebody in the office that's always driving the truck around. And this is with all the negative stuff. And they go from a cubicle to office to cubicle, trying to get other people to jump on this trunk, this bandwagon with you, because misery loves company, and they want to be the people that are complaining. And I always urge people, don't jump on that truck. Don't participate in all the negative things that other people may say. And at some point, you have to realize that you cannot convert everybody. And, and that's okay. They may be okay someplace else. They may do very well in another company, another organization, but not this one. And they may stay in the way of your having a complete turnaround of your team. And that's a tough decision that people are going to have to weigh. But that's why they pay the leaders the big bucks, to be able to make those tough decisions.
So what's that threshold? I mean, I've always kind of wondered that, because I've been through some organizational changes too, and there's always, it's never just one person. There's usually several people. Maybe they've been there a long time. They're used to a certain culture. They don't like a lot of people don't like change, right? And I understand that, right? But change is inevitable. But what's the threshold where you're investing your time and resources into someone to get them to buy into the culture, versus saying this is not really working out? Is there a threshold there? I'd be, as a leader, I'd be wondering that, because it can be costly, because then you have to, maybe fill that job. So that can be costly, but it could be more costly if you keep that person. So where does that kind of threshold take place where you say, yes, we can work with this person, I think they'll come along, or it's just not working out?
Tony, do you want to take a stab?
Magic wand.
The first thing I'd say about what Barbara just said is, of course you don't want to get rid of somebody. It's really difficult, but you do need to sometimes. And when you do, one of the things you're going to find is a lot of the other employees are very relieved. They have been bothered too. And so what I would say, and looking at Barbara's story, it's when the person is actively driving the truck in a different direction and trying to enroll people in sabotage, that gets to be the point where you need to take a look at perhaps making a move.
Right. I'll tell one quick story, and I'm sure we're going over time, Brian. When I was at Fannie Mae, and I don't know whether, Tony, I engaged you in this as our outside consulting or not, but in my department, we were having some challenges where there were lots of rumors going around amongst the team. I had about 30 people or so on the team, and there was a lot of backstabbing and things that were going on. And I kept getting stories from the directors that were reporting to me. And finally, I got everybody my management team together, and we plotted out what we were going to do to stop all of this. And so we called a meeting on a Friday evening, and we set it for first thing Monday morning. And so they were all kind of, what was this all hands meeting? And I had the room set up in a circle, such that everybody was set up in a horseshoe circle. And we let them all get in there first. And then me and my 4 directors walked into the room, and we sat at the front of the room. And we confronted them about all of these rumors and what was going on, and showed them the downside of the very negative things that they were doing. Now, there was one senior employee that was at the heart of all of this trouble. And I talk about this situation in my book. And you could see this person as And we didn't call out anybody. We reprimanded the entire team. And you could see this person start to slink down in her chair because the walls were kind of closing in on her. And the rest of the team then saw who was at the heart of the entire problem. And the team referred to that day as Black Monday. And that's how the day was known, as Black Monday, because I called them all on the carpet. Either you're participating in this or you're allowing it to happen. And that's not good for our organization and where we want to be. Let me tell you, a little bit later, a couple of months later, that employee transferred someplace else because she no longer had the audience and the support in the organization to keep up all of the negative stuff that was going on. So that's just one example of how we handled it at one point.
Well, it sounds like there was a lot of enabling going on, and you sort of dissolved that enabling,
right,
by having that conversation.
Exactly.
It's a quick one. There's one behavior that I found very difficult to work with, and that's when a person feels like a big victim. All the time, whatever happens, they're a victim. It's when people aren't willing to take responsibility for their own behavior. That's a very hard thing to deal with. That's often deep-seated. That often comes from childhood.
Wow.
And sometimes you're not going to change it. Sometimes that can change, and it can change when, as Barbara said, the whole team begins to decide we're going to do things differently because it's so much more rewarding.
Exactly. So
I have just for myself. I have one last question. I want to turn it over to Barbara to kind of take us home here. But Tony and Barbara, obviously, you answer this as well. When you leave work, we all go back to our respective homes, right? Whatever that home might look like. They probably all look different, and the way we all grew up probably looks a little bit different. And the way we perceive things in life through our culture, through not just the office culture, but through the cultures that we have, whether it's your political beliefs, your social beliefs, religious beliefs. How the heck can we expect to bring that all into one office and have everybody I know not everybody's going to get along. We know that's not going to happen. But with the amount of differences that people have, and I say differences, I'm not even talking conflict. I'm just saying the life experiences that we've had that have all been different. You mentioned somebody's childhood. They might have a different childhood than I did, and they're still dealing with issues that they've had from that childhood, right? How can we expect a business to succeed from a cultural standpoint if we all are from different backgrounds, different cultures when we come into that office? It seems like it's impossible. It's not, obviously, but how does that kind of play into this whole thing?
What I'd say about that is you're really nailing it. I mean, this is a real important thing. If your culture is strong enough, if you are pursuing goals that are meaningful enough to people, and if you're doing the little things that Barbara described, you go and say hi to everybody every morning. People feel engaged by something new and powerful and very nurturing. Then you can overcome an awful lot, and people will begin to grow as individuals. They'll begin to get stronger and more responsible. It's an incredible thing to experience. There's a lot of beauty in that.
Yeah, I would agree. And Brian, you pointed out something in our first introductory podcast about the differences between you and I. And you're being from upstate New York, white guy. I'm from the South, Black, female, and but yet our value system is so similar that the differences that we have, you overcome them. And I think that, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, it's very difficult for either of you to have experienced what I've experienced as a Black female coming up, just like I can't experience what a white male has. And so how do you put yourself in somebody else's shoes to try to understand the perspective that they come from? And it doesn't have to be racial. It can be parts of the country. Tony is in California. Brian, you and I are on the East Coast. Even that's very different from the way the West Coast operates from the East Coast. You know, we're fairly buttoned up, and for lots of reasons. But it's how can you put yourself in somebody else's shoes to try to understand how they think about things.
You know, there's another part of that. I completely agree. When I work with Barbara, I love her incisive mind. I love the way she can look at complex things and say, here's what matters. I can't do it that way. I get so that I enjoy her difference. And with Brian, when I see his communication style and when he puts it in writing, I go, oh, that clarifies a whole bunch of things that I needed to have clarified.
Right.
I mean, it gets to be a gift. I think you need to start with sharing values, but it gets so that working with people who are different from you is really a very rewarding thing.
In fact, I sent you a note, I don't know, a month or so ago, and I said, your writing skills. I don't have that writing skill and being able to do that. And I said, God, I wish I could write like that and express myself on paper that way. That's just not my skill set. But
yeah,
go ahead.
My response to that was, yeah, I wish I could do it. I can write about it, but Barbara knows how to do it. I mean, so it's a lovely thing.
Right.
And I know we're going to talk about, we're going to have some future, a bunch of future shows coming up. And I know one of those we'll probably talk about some of the, biases that people have in the workplace. Mm-hmm. And, how sad, how unfortunate that somebody would maybe miss out on learning something from someone else simply because of their background or the way they look. That's obviously not for today. And not even in the business climate, not even in the business, in the office, right? But even outside, having a conversation with somebody on a social level and denying that person an opportunity, or denying yourself the opportunity to talk to that person simply because they look a certain way and you have a preconceived notion. How tragic that is. But I know that's a different show.
Yeah, we're going to have 2 shows on that. I think we talked about that. Yeah, exactly. So you want me to close it out here?
No, they want to hear. People want to get on to the next, so they're waiting for the next show now. So we can talk all day.
Well, first of all, I asked Tony, any final advice to organizations, Tony, as people are going through all of these changes that are being thrust on us by the pandemic, by other things, the economic challenges? Any final words to people as we start to move through this?
I'd just say this. You can't just continue where you were. You need to start up again. You need to identify again why you work together, what your goals are. You need to identify some timelines and some boundaries, because if you don't, what we're seeing people do in a number of organizations all over the country is they're getting into big conflicts. And leaders, this is a bit odd. Leaders are very surprised by this, and so if you are ready for it and you can see that this is natural, you're going to spend less time being outraged and more time saying, okay, let's get at it, because it's an opportunity to restructure some things, redefine some things, and work in an even better way.
Very good. That's an excellent advice to close out our show. Tony, thank you so much for being with us today. I know we're going to have you on again because we've got lots to talk about. And Brian, as always, thank you for being my sidekick. I ask everybody listening and viewing us, thank you for joining us today. We're delighted to have you here. Tune in next month for another segment of Barbara's Banner. We will announce via social media what the next topic would be, but if you've got some suggestions, why don't you send them to us as well? Goodbye, everybody. Have a good day.